Welcome. With so many tragic accidents, it's hard to deliver the news without a catch in the throat. 8 dead in the Amtrak derailment. A toddler killed from a crumbling building facade on the Upper West Side. Gas explosions, construction crane collapses, manhole fires, and more. We call these accidents, but our first guest thinks differently, that such incidents are often the predictable, preventable consequence of a poor safety culture, the psychology of safety, in a moment. Also on the program today, will revulsion against the horrific mob murder of a woman in Afghanistan help bring Muslim women closer to equality? Then 2 New York stories: free solar-powered green carts for street vendors, nice, but they also want permits, and a proposal to undo what has been called the worst act of architectural vandalism in New York, the demolition of the original Penn station. It could be rebuilt. First, though, safety culture. What is it exactly? Let's ask psychologist Steve Simon, who coined the term safety culture 30 years ago. His company, Culture Change Consultants, based here in New York, guides corporations in how to save life and limb. Their 7-year-long effort with General Motors, for example, resulted in a 95% accident reduction among workers. Dr. Simon joins us via Skype from Fresno, California. Welcome. Hello from New York.
Hello, Brian. Nice to be here.
You teach that there are the written safety rules and the unwritten rules. What are the differences?
Well, the written rules are the ones that appear in manuals. They are on signs. The unwritten rules are the ones that we follow. They are the culture of the group, the norms of the group. So imagine, I grew up in New Jersey, imagine driving on the New Jersey Turnpike and the speed limit might say 55 miles an hour. That's the written rule. And what do people actually drive? They drive 72, they drive 76, and what do the rest of us follow? And by the way, are they breaking the law or following the law when they're driving 75 in a 65 zone? They're clearly breaking the law, the posted law, but they're following the most powerful laws that govern human behavior, which is the norms of the group.
So social phenomena. And this could relate to things like the building facade collapse on the Upper West Side that killed a toddler, or the Amtrak derailment in Philadelphia?
It could. In almost every incident investigation, there's a combination of factors. A lot of them are the technical and possibly a machine or operator error. And there's also what you might think of as the cultural component to it. So if we think about the space shuttle tragedies, in fact, I remember in the New York Times there was a headline about the Columbia shuttle tragedy that said incident investigation showed broken safety culture. And yeah, there are the O-rings in one and the tiles in the other, and those are the technical sides. But there was also the fact that a group of engineers knew what the problem was and that they shouldn't go to launch in cold weather. And they went to senior management, and senior management said, we have production schedules. So in that case, what's the real problem? Is it a failure of the tile, or is it a failure of the culture? And in most instances, Brian, it's a combination of both. But it is the culture. It's not just the technical issues.
Where did you get this idea that problems are individual, not individual, but often social and cultural? Was it from working with professionals?
You know, strangely, I was a psychologist, and I did work, with addicts and alcoholics, and was very aware of the therapeutic community movement. And there, it struck me that you have an anti-addiction culture having a huge impact on people trying to save their lives and recover from substance abuse. And maybe the same principles of the therapeutic community movement, which is strong norms that had an impact on the individual, could apply in the workplace. So began thinking about the culture of safety and maybe being able to construct an anti-accident kind of environment. And that was 30 years ago, and that was kind of where it started.
So how do you do it? Is it primarily a top-down thing that has to start with the CEO?
You know, that's a great point, because I thought so at the beginning, and most of the writing says so. And from doing this for such a long time, I think my experience has contradicted that. I've seen a lot of organizations be very, very successary in changing their culture when they started at the bottom, where they started in the middle, where they started in the periphery, kind of a village by village approach. Now, there's no question that having the CEO committed accelerates it, makes it more likely to last, to be built to last. But it really can start. It can start anywhere. Anybody, whether they're supervisor or a manager or a union leader, can have a huge impact on an organization.
And trust comes into this at a certain level?
Yeah, I mean, trust is maybe the most toxic element of a negative culture. A lot of times in explaining how culture fits in with the ordinary approaches to safety, kind of the conventional is, you think about a stew that has meat and vegetables, and those are the things that OSHA goes after, the compliance, the safety programs. But that sits in something, that sits in a broth, and the broth is the culture. And the most toxic element of a safety culture is trust. I mean, imagine those safety suggestion boxes that every company has, and what happens if people don't, they put in the suggestion and then nobody does anything. The trust is kind of blown, and it's very hard to get anything done in an environment filled with mistrust.
So how does a manager communicate that he or she really cares about the culture, about safety first? Maybe you can give me an example from your experience at General Motors.
Yeah, I think there's two ways. I think one is what some managers call skin in the game, just going out onto the floor and talking to people. How are you? Is there anything we can do for your safety? That personal connection is great. The other is looking for those teachable moments, for real symbolic leadership. And I do remember the head of manufacturing at General Motors. The story was he walked onto the assembly line floor, plant to 5,000 people, and said to one of the guys on the assembly line, "I notice you don't have your gloves on, and I care about your safety. Why don't you go over to the locker and grab them and get somebody to look at the line for you?" And the worker said, but Joe, it's 10 minutes away. You're going to have to actually stop the line. And this was like $5,000 profit per car. And they were making a car a minute on his station on the line. And the head of manufacturing said, "Well, okay, but I care about your hands, so I want you to go do this." And they stopped the line. And that was known as the shot that heard around the world. And that was the type of, I guess you could call, symbolic leadership, a statement that nothing should be compromised for safety, that began their process of what ended up as a 95% reduction in injuries.
That's a great story. How much of the problem is a macho thing, like guys who don't want to strap in or ask a colleague to brace a ladder or whatever?
So my favorite, my own favorite story about Macho is we did some work with Harley Davidson. And I think my favorite photo of all time when it comes to safety culture was they showed me a picture of a customer, and the typical burly guy with tattoos and a beard, and said, "This is our customer." And of course, their slogans all have to do with freedom. And then he showed me another photo, and he said, "Now I'm going to show you a photo of our employees." And it was a photo of the same guy. And he said, "Imagine our culture problem of taking this macho dude who leaves the plant on his hog and has an ethic of do whatever you want to do, and then comes in and has to follow all our rules. And they did it, and they have an extremely successful safety culture by working again on the norms of the group. So I think the answer is if you can engage employees to and empower them to take ownership of their own culture and give them the tools to be able to do that, then they'll create norms that even will defeat machoism.
The biggest thing we're hearing since the Amtrak derailment is not culture, but technology, that if they had this thing called positive train control, which is kind of like a GPS that automatically speeds up or slows down the train depending on the speed limit at that point of the track, to override human error, that this might not have happened. Are they missing the point or part of the point?
I think that they're getting part of the point. And whenever you can put a technical solution in to override human error, by all means. But I remember that similarly in manufacturing plants and warehouses, they did that with forklifts, and they put in governors so you can only drive 11 miles an hour. And, you know, it was no surprise that the guys took duct tape, covered the governor so they could drive whatever speed the production demanded. And look, I don't, they're in the midst of the investigation with Amtrak, so I don't know the details of that, and certainly any technical improvements. But yes, they're clearly missing the point. And the larger culture point is this technology has been around for a while, and what are all the forces that have resulted in it not being put in place yet? And in this case, we're talking about the national culture of safety culture of when it comes to safety, and not just the individual company, and certainly not just the individual operator, in that case the engineer. Another
example, you worked with utilities?
Yeah, utilities are a great example because utilities in the field, the men and women out there working on gas mains and electric poles are at risk of life and limb every day. And the most effective approach there has been to work at the grassroots level. In fact, every apprentice, everybody who comes to work for a utility in the electric field goes through a pretty lengthy apprentice program. And the most effective culture work I've seen is where the utility actually engages the apprentices themselves, because they then get taught something in apprentice school and they go out onto the crew, and frequently what they find in the crew is that the rules that they've been taught are not being followed. So how do you deal with that clash of subcultures within the company? And when they alert people that the culture matters, they generally can get the group to follow the rules a lot better because they're following it for their own reasons.
And then how about backsliding once you make progress, like when new people come in?
When new people come in, I think the best way to prevent backsliding is by a combination of grassroots teams, which I'm using the term grassroots here as floor line employees, plus mentoring programs, one-on-one, peer-to-peer, and always peer-to-peer. And to realize that the visible program is to put the new person through training, but the invisible culture, and the invisible culture is the more powerful part of culture, is that they're going to meet something different when they get out there working with everybody else. So if you have people greeting them and showing them the new way and taking care of them, they can help that transition.
And does this spill over to home, safety at home? So many accidents happen off the job.
I mean, it really does. And a great example of this is DuPont, that, of course, has had a great safety culture for a couple of hundred years. And I've actually gotten in a car and driven through Wilmington, Delaware, to see if the legend is true, which is that the DuPont workers, when they're at home and they're mowing their grass, do they wear personal protective equipment? Do they have boots on? And do they have glasses? And they do, and gloves. So I think the awareness on the job carries over very much into the home, and a lot of organizations with excellent safety cultures make it a point to go beyond just the plant and go to a 24/7 off-the-job safety culture effort.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Very important, very instructive.
Thank you.
On Monday, 11 Afghan police were sentenced to a year in jail for standing idly by as a mob murdered a woman on the streets of the capital, Kabul. This 2 weeks after the court sentenced 4 men to death, 8 to long prison terms for that same brutal killing of 27-year-old Farkhunda Malikzaka. She was beaten, run over, and set afire. The attack incited by a false claim that she had burned a Qur'an. It brought women protesters wearing bloody masks into the streets of Kabul. Of course, not all countries with Islamic governments have the same cultural environment, but the setbacks and the progress toward women's rights can be seen as a regional narrative. Joining us via Skype from Turkey, Zainab Salbi, founder of Women for Women International. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
What were those women in Kabul protesting in a larger sense? They were protesting more than the unjustified attack against one individual, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Brian, as we are in a very critical stage in Islamic history right now. Fundamentalists are increasing in their rigidity. Almost every fundamentalist that is being created is more fundamentalist than the group before it. Now, women are getting the most hits. You know, it's becoming much more rigid on women today than women 30 years ago or 20 years ago even. And so they are actually confronting the harshest interpretation of Islam, and all the pressure is on them. You must do this, you must wear this, you must say this, you must walk like this, you must behave like this. And the pressure is, the worse it's getting, the worse they are feeling it. And so, you know, the case, you know, so they're actually also are becoming the most outspoken groups of Muslims because they are getting the worst of it. The case of Farkhunda, for example, she was not any woman. She was actually a learned woman in Islam. She graduated in her college degree from Islamic studies. So she knew her rights. She knew what is right and what is wrong. She knew what is available for her and what is not. And she was in a discussion with the Imam about that. The more women are becoming oppressed, the more they are outspoken. The more they are more curious to learn about their rights from within the religion, the more they are getting the hit the most. And that the protests, whether in Kabul or whether at the larger Muslim world, I am in Istanbul right now. Last week I was in Morocco. Is constantly the same, that women are getting it the worst, and they are really upset right now. And we're having percolations of a higher rate of women speaking up against what's happening to them.
So there's a paradox of fundamentalists getting more fundamentalist and more conservative, and then a backlash making women more feminist. Why do you think the crackdown is happening right now? There seems to be a liberalization with respect to women's rights in most of the rest of the world. Why at this time do we have ISIS and these other movements that are so retrograde when it comes to sexual equality?
Well, they're not only retrogrades in terms of sexual equality, they're retrogrades in every sense of equality. I mean, mind you, ISIS is also killing minorities, and that's not only religious minorities such as the Christians and Yazidis, but also Shias and anybody who doesn't agree with them. Mainstream Muslims are right now seen as a threat to ISIS. You know, they're killing mainstream Muslims as well. So it's not only gender, but the women issues is like becoming the battlefield to demonstrate their ideology. You know, it's just the easiest battlefield to demonstrate their ideology. Why they are increasing? They're not increasing in their rigidity and fundamentalism. It's not only because of women's issues. They're increasing it for a variety of issues. The first one is they feel that the larger Muslim countries or communities have been defeated for so long, and they are saying, one of their ideologies, they're saying, we are going to take things under our own control. We no longer will depend on the Western world to save us, nor on our leaders to save us. They've all failed us, and we are going to take charge. That ideology is actually speaking rather to the public, not at large, but it's speaking to a nerve in the larger mainstream Muslim public, because there is a sense of defeat, there is a sense of betrayal, there is a sense of the West promised us things and did not deliver, there is a sense of our dictators promised us things and did not deliver. So that ideology does speak to a nerve, a sensitive nerve in the region. The second thing is they're providing jobs. You know, ISIS is providing jobs, and so is the Taliban. They're paying people $500 a month, $1,000 a month. And the third thing is they're saying within this framework of our own ummah or caliphate or whatever it is, that's women's role. And so women become the place where the demonstration of this ideology happens.
Is there a Quranic underpinning of patriarchal society? Is this in the Quran?
I think that's up to anybody's interpretation, and I think no two people will agree on that. The Quran came, or Islam came, to indeed a very patriarchal society that used to practice feticides, for example, and the religion shifted the community where the Prophet Muhammad came to, from killing female babies to saying women and men are equal in front of God, and to actually referring throughout the Quran as women and men, female and male, in front of God are equal in Allah in all of their rights. Now, that's one aspect of the Quran that is equally there and present as the other patriarchal aspect, which was speaking to a patriarchal society, where the men provided and the women received, and the women were protected. And so when, for example, there are aspects of the Quran where the woman does not inherit equally as the men, some argue that that was spoken to that particular era, which was indeed a patriarchal era, and it made sense out of that. And do we need to adjust it right now to our own era, where women and men are more or less equal in their responsibilities, not only vis-a-vis God, but vis-a-vis their responsibilities towards their families and their partners and their larger communities? And so, yes, of course, there are patriarchal elements of Islam, as in all Abrahamic religions, frankly. And there's also equal elements within Islam. Which one we choose is a choice right now that many Muslims are confronted with. Do we go this direction? Do we go to this? Do we promote the good, or do we promote the patriarchal aspects? These are debates that this is probably, we are in the darkest age of Islamic history, and I trust we will will grow out of it. How we grow is the critical issue, and when do we do it is the critical issue.
How about in Afghan history, the individual incident we were talking about before? There is a history of feminist speech and striving in Afghanistan, right?
Of course there is. Of course, I mean, and not only it goes back to the sort of the 70s and before the Soviet invasions for women, where Afghan women were sort of the pride of the region, where people from Pakistan would go to Afghanistan to see cinemas and to see women writers and authors and actresses and all of these things. And that has went backward in major ways in the last 40, 50 years. And so, but there is a precedence of that history, and that history has stayed. It just went underground. It's just women started implementing their activism and their feminism and their voices in an underground movement, which actually, one has to say, increased in the last 13 years since the invasion. But that increase does not mean that the whole society is stable right now, or that everything is okay right now. But you do see Afghan women rising up, and has risen up since the invasion. They played a major role in politics, in the economy, in culture, in every single aspect. I myself had the privilege of working in Afghanistan for more than 10 years and met some of the most inspiring women in my life. So there is, that exists, that history exists, and that current contemporary history exists. Right now, what we need to see at the larger world is that we need to support these women's voices. So it is vital for world stabilities and for their own country stabilities. And this is not new. They actually have history of that. We just need to support it, endorse it, create more platforms to hear their voices. And
so how can our viewers participate if they want to? Is it via social media?
By social media, I would say, go out of our way to hear what Muslim women have to say, and obviously not all Muslim women are saying the same thing. Some have joined the patriarchal way of looking at things, and some are saying, no, that's not the way for our religion. Malala Yousafzai is a great example of it, but there are many women like her, and young women and adult women like her. So we need to search. When we are discussing Islam or Taliban or Iraq or ISIS, if I was a viewer, I would always say, where are the women's voices from these countries? Where I want to hear the women's voices. I want to read the women's voices. We need to hear them. They are the voices. They exist. We just need to hear them.
Good luck in Istanbul and everywhere else. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
New York street vendors fight for more permits, which have been frozen since 1991. That's next. From the beloved sabrette with sauerkraut, or do you prefer just mustard, to kimchi tacos, street food options in New York City have never been more varied or better across the city. The streets are dotted, as so many of you know, with carts, food trucks, and outdoor markets catering to every taste. Street food made the headlines this past week when the City Council and the private firm Move Systems announced that they will produce these ecologically friendly food carts for street vendors, giving away 500 carts for free. But according to our next guest, the city could be doing much more for these small business people, like expanding the number of licenses available. Part of the Urban Justice Center, Sean Basinski's Street Vendor Project provides legal representation and advocacy on behalf of street vendors, whom the project feels too often get skewered by the powerful interests. Joining us as well, project board member and street vendor himself, Mohammed Atiyah. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, sir. Thanks for having us, Brian.
Tell us first about the new cart.
Yeah, the new cart's very exciting. There's a private company, as you mentioned, Move Systems, who recognize that vendors are really suffering from health hazards out there. Standing over charcoal grills every day, 10 hours for years on end is not healthy. You've got the gasoline generators, not good for the vendors or the rest of us. And so this is a great idea. They have a new model, more environmentally friendly. It's going to be optional for vendors if they want to work with them. And we think it's going to be good for vendors, good for the image of vendors, and also good for the whole city and the whole planet.
Tell us about your business. What do you sell and where?
I sell smoothies and juices on 50th Street and 6th Avenue in Midtown.
Rockefeller Center, prime location.
Close to Rockefeller, yeah. Like across the street, not actually in Rockefeller. It's a nice place, so crowded, a lot of people, a lot of employees, a lot of tourists. It's a very nice area.
And how did you get involved with the movement? Because you're also in leadership with Sean, right?
No, actually it started with, I was just a vendor, like a normal vendor, and then some of the Street Vendor Project members came to me doing outreach, and they told me about it. Like, I haven't really heard about it for so long. I've been vending for like 2 years, and then they met me and they told me about the project. So I got so excited, then I joined. That was in 2010. And then after I joined for like 2 or 3 years, I got in the board.
And what's your main issue?
My main issue right now is the permits. This is our main issue, everybody's issue.
It's the number of permits?
The number of permits, and I don't have my own permit as a vendor.
You don't have a permit?
I don't have a permit.
Even with a prime location?
Even with the prime location.
But you're there legally right now?
I'm there legally. I do have a permit that I rented from somebody who has it.
Ah, so Sean, put that in context for us. He rented a permit from another person who I guess owns it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1981, Brian, the city council got together. The big businesses asked them to do this, and they capped the number of vending permits at 3,000 food vending permits in the whole city. As a result, the demand is much greater than the supply, which has stayed in place for 34 years now, and it's led to this black market, which is not good for vendors. Like Mohammed, they have to pay a lot of money to somebody who's not even vending. The simple solution is the city council should simply increase the number of permits, and if you want to be a vendor, you should be able to go down to the health department and get a permit and go to work. That would be good for the city. It would obviously be good for vendors, because right now these permits on the black market are very expensive, and it's a shady business.
Sounds like the taxi medallions, which have been busted up by the advent of Uber and things like that. Is there any equivalent possible in the vendor world?
I don't know about the technology. I can't quite wrap my head around that, but it is similar that we believe, and I think we can all agree, that the people who have the permits, should be the vendors who are actually there working on the street so hard every day, not somebody else who's sitting in Florida or sitting in a garage somewhere with a bunch of them. And so this is a simple solution. We hope the city council and the mayor will be on board. We think they are.
May I ask how much you pay the owner in rent?
For the 3-year permit, it's $20,000.
You pay that guy $20,000
for 3 years permit.
And he doesn't actually do any work and sell anything?
No, nothing but the paperwork.
So why isn't there a law, Sean, that in order to maintain your permit, you have to be out there and actually vending?
Yeah, that might be a good idea. It's a little more complicated than that, because if Muhammad goes away to Egypt for a couple of months, we think actually, maybe his friend, his brother, his cousin should be able to vend. But that might be one solution. But we think that actually the easier solution is just to lift that cap, to go back to the way the city was before 1981. That way, people, new people as well, people from chef school, from culinary school, people who have dreams about selling food on the street, they should be able to do that.
But that raises another issue, which I know the city has always been concerned about in this area, which is street clutter, right? Too much congestion, especially in places like 6th Avenue and 50th Street and many other corners where there's so much foot traffic that they do have an interest, a public policy interest in limiting the number of vendors, right?
Sure, it's true, and in fact, there's a whole list of streets. Another issue is where, and once you get a permit, is where you can go vend. And right now, there's a whole list of streets, about 30 pages long, where vendors cannot go. Certain days, certain times. We think the city should take a look at that list and really, when there is a street that's too crowded, a sidewalk at a particular time, like rush hour, it should be closed to vending. But otherwise, it should be open to vending. And we think that the whole city would benefit from this, not just in Manhattan, but the outer boroughs. There's so many streets right now where there are no vendors, and there could be business.
Well, when you have a permit, is it a generalized permit and you can go where you want, or is it a permit for a location?
No, it's not a location. It's a citywide permit. You can be anywhere in the city.
Really?
Yep.
So your location is so prime, 50th and 6th. There must be a lot of competition for that spot if the permit is good anywhere. Do you have to get there super early in the morning and beat out everybody every day?
Not really. Actually, the corner is so big. The sidewalk is very wide. We have many vendors over there.
Yes.
I think it's over 10 vendors on my sidewalk. They selling lunch, they selling hot dogs, they selling different things. It's very nice. So I think it's not the competition issue right now we're having. If we're having more permits and more streets open, we're going to have more business everywhere. I don't think if I have another permit, I'm going to go to a place that's so crowded, I'm going to try to find a space over there. Of course not. I'm going to go somewhere that nobody have been there before. Even I'm going to have the guts to take the risk of trying new business with new place because I'm not paying the $20,000, right?
So is city council... we have a new progressive city council, a relatively new progressive mayor. Are they more open to street vendors, please, than Mayor Bloomberg was?
For sure they are, so far. And this is a progressive issue, Brian, because it's about people who have been left outside the system for so long, who, like Muhammad, by definition, don't have a storefront. They wish they could. If they had the capital, Muhammad would have a store, would have a restaurant. And so this is the history of New York is this way, where people come here to this country and get their start off and on the street. It's about economic justice and it's about equality, and those have been the center points of Mayor de Blasio's rhetoric, and we certainly hope he follows through. And the city council so far and the speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito, have been very supportive, and we're hoping to hear something from them soon in terms of a concrete plan.
I also hear that there's a push to get vendors to have letter grades like storefront restaurants do. Do you oppose that?
No, in fact, we're in favor. We talk to our vendors. They say that's a great idea. The vendors are already getting inspected by the health department. They're already getting tickets, but not getting the benefit of being able to place an A or even a B there. The people would see it and become customers.
You're for that?
Yeah, sure, of course. Like many times we get inspected and we even pass. We get like the clearance letter that we have no violation, and then we don't get any grade. So how people would know? We have like some of the vendors, some of them make bad reputation for the street vending at all. So people get scared. They think that we're dangerous. They can't eat from us. We don't get inspected. People don't know that we get inspected maybe 100 times more than restaurants. I get inspected every week.
What do they
6th
do
Avenue.
with a fresh fruit smoothie vendor? Do they come and squeeze the oranges, or what?
Not really. When it gets to us, they check everything. They make sure everything is nice and clean, everything is organized, the temperatures. They want to make sure that the cut fruit is very cold as it's in the fridge. They make sure that the coolers are clean, the blenders, everything is working properly. They do check us.
Do you have do you have a particular goal in mind for financing additional vendors?
Yeah. Well, it's hard for vendors to get the capital to really go out there and buy a new cart. Move systems might help with that. But also, we're working on developing many of our members, their businesses, because, sometimes vendors, they want to sell something new and different and healthier, but they don't always know how. They don't always have the capital to do that, Brian. So we actually have a small loan fund at the Street Vendor Project called the Pushcart Fund. And it's a collaboration with a group called the BCNA that does micro lending to mostly immigrants. But we need more capital for that, and we're going to need the financial industry, I think, and the micro lending groups to get on board.
How did you get the capital?
No, I just saved it. I've been working for many years. I saved, and then I borrowed some for my family back home, and then I just started.
How about the variety that's out there now? People who grew up a generation ago probably only thought of like the hot dogs and the pretzels and the sweetened peanuts and stuff like that. But now there's all this chicken with rice, and there are taco trucks, and there seems to be a proliferation of different kinds of vendors. Waffles.
It's exciting, right?
Very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, we think that vendors are really a reflection of the diversity of the city. It's a beautiful thing, going to different neighborhoods and seeing the people of those neighborhoods reflected in the vendors on the street. And sometimes I feel like, the city is so full of Duane Reads and Starbucks, the only local culture might be from that vendor. And the food, of course, is great, and we get to try different things. And it's fantastic. New York is at its best on the street. And
some people see a hipsterification of street vendors. Where is this?
That's right. Especially during the recession, there were a lot of people who left Wall Street, who got fired from their jobs, who said, I want to be in business, but I can't afford a restaurant, so they got a food truck or a stand in a market. And a whole new generation of people, a whole new kind of people who maybe before would have turned up their noses at the idea of street food are embracing it. It's great for the community. It's great for immigrant vendors like Mohammed. It's also great for people who, with big dreams. And so it just broadens the pool of people who are thinking about great street food, and we're pro.
I also understand that you're working on a market in the Bronx. Tell us about that. Is that more of an indoor space?
It's a beautiful outdoor covered space, actually, at 116th and Park Avenue. It's outside of the famous La Marqueta.
That's not, just so I'm clear, that's not the Bronx, that's East Harlem. Right?
East Harlem, yeah, sorry. Right outside of the famous public market, the indoor portion called La Marqueta, there's an outdoor plaza where now, in conjunction and in cooperation with the speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito, and EDC, we're bringing vendors now every Sunday, all summer long, from 12 to 6, bringing vendors from the neighborhood and from across the city, some fantastic food. We have a beer garden, we've got music, trying to revitalize that public space, which is really historic, but also give a chance for vendors to get started on something new.
And for that space, you don't need the traditional city permits?
Which is good. You do need a permit, but it's much, much, much easier to get than the 20 or 25 years you have to wait on the waiting list for your own vending permit, and you don't have to pay $25,000. In fact, right now we're waiving the fees for vendors, and so you can get started for almost nothing. So if anybody out there wants to come sell food at Vendy Plaza, we'd love to hear from you.
But you only have so much space at Vendy Plaza, so how do you choose among potential vendors?
Well, it's brand new, so hopefully we have that problem soon enough. But right now, it's been hard, we have to build a space, and we have to get people to come, and eventually we hope to be able to get the very best of street food. And there'll be a vetting process.
And there's a space in Queens, too?
There's a new, it's not ours, but there's a new exciting market called the Queens Night Market. A friend of ours has put this on. It was a big risk. Happens out in Flushing on Saturday nights. And it's been an amazing hit. There's a great desire out there. People are tired, I think, of going to restaurants or going to bars. And this idea of going out to a marketplace is something that, happened 100 years ago, but it's really coming back.
That's part of the hipsterification, isn't it? The Asian and Chinese and Korean hipsters in this case.
It turns out in Flushing, there's a lot of people who I think they found an untapped market. Thousands of people who want to come out on a Saturday night and sample this amazing street food, not coming into the city maybe. They want to stay out there in Flushing, and it's really worked for them. They're doing a great job.
So, Mohammed, last question. What's your long-term dream? Are you hoping to build up from a vendor cart to a storefront, or how do you see your future?
To a restaurant, actually. But I just hope I can be making this money and saving enough to just start it. The restaurants in the city will cost a lot of money. It needs a lot of budget just to start. But we hope the business come up easily.
Where does your dream life have you opening that restaurant? Where is it?
Where is it? It's coming soon. I'm just waiting for it.
No, I mean, like what part of town?
I think Manhattan.
Yeah.
My fantasy is Times Square. That's always a fantasy. Times Square, Midtown, anywhere in Times Square will be great.
Crossroads of the world.
Yes, right there.
Meanwhile, people can come to 50th and 6th and
right
try
there.
your smoothies.
I'll try my smoothies.
Thank you both very much.
You're
Goodbye.
welcome.
Thanks so much.
Thanks
man.
a lot.
New York's Penn Station. It's the busiest and most congested transportation hub in North America, handling over 500,000 comings and goings every day. With no signs of the passenger traffic abating, the focus is on the future. But nothing stands taller in the mind than the past. The original 1910 Penn Station, which was torn down in 1963. Its destruction gave birth to the city's modern preservationist movement. Restoring the grandiosity of that Beaux-Arts masterpiece has fueled support for a $1 billion project currently underway that will transform the big post office across 8th Avenue into Moynihan Station for Amtrak passengers. But our next guest has an additional plan to rebuild from scratch the whole original Penn Station, where Madison Square Garden is today. Richard Cameron is the principal designer at Atelier & Company in Brooklyn and is one of the original founders of the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Brian. I'm delighted to be here.
And we're going to tell this story and hear your proposals very much through imagery. So let's go right to the first image that we're going to put up. And you tell us what this is that only New Yorkers of a very certain age would remember.
Well, it's actually a view from Gimbel's department store, another long-departed part of the city's history. But it's an aerial view of the 7th Avenue front of McKim's Penn Station. I call it McKim's Penn Station. I suppose that's a thing with being an architect designer. You think about the person that designed it, but it's very much New York's Penn Station. It was the vision of Charles McKim and Alexander Cassatt, who was the president of the Pennsylvania Railway, but also of Seth Low, who was the mayor of the city at the time, and a number of people who saw this as a kind of great culminating vision for what New York could be and should be.
And let's go around that building so people will recognize the location. That's the current Penn Station location, 7th Avenue, right there. And this shot?
Well, so this is the 7th Avenue facade, which McKim actually designed as a reflection of the colonnades at St. Peter's in Rome. He very much saw this building as a kind of collage of great European typologies, I guess, if you will. So this wonderful, and again, looking north on 7th Avenue. Today there's a great, tall, modern office block occupying that part of the site. And this is either the 31st or 33rd. It must be the 31st Street.
Yeah, I think that's
side.
31st Street. That's the south edge.
Right, the two sides with these amazing colonnades that let light down into the ramps that cars could drive down and drop people off into the main waiting room. So that's the axis of the Great Waiting Room. And there's the interior of the Great Waiting Room with some of the later incursions into it that I think led partly to its destruction.
Gee, people might think of, if they didn't know, that they were looking at Grand Central Terminal with the high roof and that kind of grandiose space. But what did you say helped lead to the tearing down of it? You said encouragement?
Well, interestingly, those escalators are modern insertions, as was that big wing thing in the previous picture, and those were attempts to try to modernize the quote unquote the building. But I think in part what happened was that it helped people not see the building very much anymore. And so as the Pennsylvania Railway started failing and the building wasn't kept up, it got dirty, all of these things got stuck into it. And eventually, the argument was, well, this is an old, dirty building. Let's just tear it down and put something new in its place.
Although, what you said, people stopped seeing the building, that must have happened, because a lot of our viewers are probably seeing the outside of the old Penn Station for the first time right now, and it's probably taking their breath away. And they're thinking, oh my God, what a beautiful work of art and architecture. This is not the kind of thing you tear down.
You wouldn't think. And it's in fact the thing that spawned, as you pointed out, the modern preservation movement. There are very famous pictures of Jackie Onassis and Philip Johnson and lots of other people marching in front of the station. People chained themselves to the columns to try and save the building. The fix was kind of in with the developers. The site had been sold. There are fabulous shots that show these signs that say, close it we must in order to build your new train station, as if we were going to get some fabulous new train station out of tearing down the old one. And we got what is today's, if you can call it Penn Station. It's really a underground warren of subway tunnels, at best.
That's right. What are we looking at here?
Well, this is a very interesting image, which was in Hilary Ballin's book, and it's part of the early vision that McKim had for the neighborhood. And one of the things that I'm interested in is what was the vision that he and Cassatt had. There's a whole fascinating story that's in the book that I brought in about their attempt to acquire enough real estate to make this project happen. But he really envisioned this like a piece of Paris, so that the buildings around it would have arcades. In that picture, you can see them. They look like the Rue de Rivoli or something like that. There was a whole kind of urban thinking that went into this. It was part of the whole City Beautiful movement notion for New York, which didn't get carried out. They kind of failed. In fact, the post office building is a part of that failure because the Pennsylvania Railway owned that site originally, and they sold it to the post office to try and fund the tunnel project, which had cost so much, by the time.
But your vision is something like this too, right?
It is. Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, I think there are a number of interesting questions about this. One is, should we rebuild Penn Station? The other is, could we rebuild it practically? But the should we rebuild it raises the question of what should we have in this neighborhood? And I was just in Denver, and they've just finished refurbishing their old Beaux-Arts train station as part of the end of a new high-speed light rail link from the airport into the city. And so now everyone coming from the airport into Denver is going to arrive into this wonderful Beaux-Arts train station. And I think that's really what a rebuilt Penn Station ought to look like. And this plan, which we created, also shows the fact that in that part of town, there's really almost no good outdoor urban space. You've got Herald Square, which is a tiny little triangle left over at Broadway. And so what we're imagining is something on the order of Bryant Park that, would help alleviate congestion here and create a genuine urban room outdoors. It would involve demolishing another modern office building to the north of the site. But the irony is that out on the avenues, at 7th and 8th Avenues, there are 1- and 2-story buildings out there, which you could easily develop into very tall, brand new buildings. So in effect, you could trade the space for floor area.
So you'd have to tear down not just an office building to the north that, I don't know what that building is, but maybe it's just some ordinary office building. That would be hard enough. But you'd have to tear down this place, Madison Square Garden.
I know.
Where the Rangers win and the Knicks lose.
Right? Maybe they would both win more if we tore it down and built it somewhere else. I don't know,
They have like 8 years left to go on their lease, don't they?
Well, it depends who you ask, but yes, according to the city. And there's a lot of argument about who owns the rights to the site and all of that. But I think that, first of all, I think Madison Square Garden, you could argue that it has some historic value, but as a building itself, it's not a terribly wonderful building. It condemns the 500,000 or so people who travel through Penn Station to this subterranean experience every day. And all of the LIRR people and all of the New Jersey Transit people come in at the eastern end of the site around 7th Avenue. And unless you do this and either build a brand new, modern train station or rebuild Penn Station, you've left those people, in the basement.
Yeah. Where would Madison Square Garden go in your vision? Do you have a place?
I'd put it out on the river. I'd actually build it into the river. If you're asking me.
On the Hudson River, where Mayor Bloomberg wanted to put a stadium once upon a time?
Yeah, I know. And had its challenges and so on. But it seems to me that you could build a fabulous arena out there. You know, you could make it accessible to cars. People who drive in wouldn't have to drive into the middle of Midtown. You could create links to it. And with the Hudson Yards development now, you know, that development is going all the way to the river.
And the 7 train is going over there.
Exactly.
And that's going to be a big deal.
Seems logical, you know, and you could do it on landfill or on pilings or something like that.
So then, in your vision, the inside of Penn Station might look something like this?
Yeah, I think it should look exactly like that, right? I mean, I sent you guys a bunch of images, but one of the things that I got interested in when I started to really look at this was, you know, has anyone else done this? And there are lots of great examples, the most spectacular of which is Dresden, which, you know, was firebombed and, of course, has been almost entirely rebuilt. So the center of Baroque Dresden looks the way that it did in the 18th century. And,
so this is high. It's spacious. I guess those are glass roof panels. So
and glass floors that let light down to the train level below. So those are kind of glass block floors. It was a very modern building in almost every way and incredibly flexible. That's the thing that's so amazing about it.
This is the actual old Penn Station inside?
Yeah, this is the train shed. Yeah, so you arrived down at the track level there and then you came up the stairs. Clearly, these days, you know, we would have to make modifications for accessibility and so on, but the building was so big, you could stick Grand Central Station inside the main waiting room from, you know, base to roof, and it would fit comfortably inside the main hall. And this was, of course, inspired by the Gare d'Orsay and some of the other great French train stations, which were which have all been, you know, either continued as train stations or repurposed, you know, as other things.
Could you actually rebuild from the old plans?
You could. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people that do work. I mean, we design work that looks like this these days, and there are about 353 drawings for this building sitting in the New York Historical Society, including full-size shop drawings, and so you could digitize all of that and get a big jump start on the whole construction process.
Is it just a matter of that it's dreary down there? I mean, I've been in the train station in Boston and in Washington and some other cities, and it's much more grand, even Grand Central Terminal right across town, you know, Penn Station pales by comparison. But is that the point? Is it just the user experience as they're going to New Jersey Transit or the Long Island Railroad? Here's D.C., by the way, for people who've never seen it. A little better experience.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I think the thing that's so extraordinary about these buildings is that the architecture frames the experience, you know. So whether you're there to just grab a coffee or take the train, whether you're dressed in a suit or whether you're dressed in your shorts with a skateboard, you know, you have a kind of ennobling experience out of it. The tall ceiling, the vaulting, all of that. Oh, there's Dresden. Yeah, exactly. So, you know.
Is this an architect's mad dream, or do you have a funding plan?
Well, I'm not alone in this, by the way, and I hardly want to make this my project. In fact, what I'd be delighted with is if somebody really important or famous got on board with this and started to talk about it. Our current mayor could make it the greatest legacy he could possibly imagine, along with his social housing projects. If he imagined being the mayor who said, I got to rebuild, you know, or I at least initiated the project to rebuild Penn Station. No, it's eminently doable. I mean, there are people who know the zoning laws and so on far better than I do, who think that with the combination of air rights sales and the property value enhancement that would go on around the site, because after all, you're talking about a huge, you know, avenue to avenue block that would then, plus in my plan anyway, a park. You know, imagine the value of the real estate all around all of those things, overlooking the train station and the park, and you know the advantage of being there. You know, we just spent $4.5 billion building the transit hub downtown.
Transit hub.
Yeah, and it serves about 50,000 people a day. And Penn Station, you know, give or take, serves about 500,000 people a day.
Yeah.
You know, it would seem to me that to spend, you know, $2, $3, $4, $5 billion, you know, depending on what you're counting, whether you count the infrastructure project, the building alone, you know, would be an investment, you know.
And you said they rebuilt Dresden after World War II. Mm-hmm. Here's a view of some of that. What are we looking at here, actually?
Well, you're looking at an entirely reconstructed Baroque city. I mean, Dresden was known as, it was the capital of Saxony. It was one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. There's the great dome of the Frauenkirche on the left. That literally was down to rubble on the ground after the firebombing. And you can see the reason the buildings look as dark as they do is they reused a lot of the burnt stone in the rebuilding. So they combined old historic fabric with new material to recreate it. The Zemper Opera House on the right, that's an entirely new city you're looking at. There.
I think what people don't realize when they hear that there's going to be a gleaming new Moynihan station there where the post office is now, they don't realize that that's just for Amtrak. Right. And that's a small percentage of the traffic there. Mostly it's the day-to-day commuters to New Jersey and Long Island, right?
Exactly. I mean, when Penn Station was almost complete, the Pennsylvania Railway bought the Long Island Railway, and because they saw that as a kind of a link. And this, of course, was before there were many people, at least large numbers of people living on Long Island. Well, now, there are more people coming in from Long Island than just about anywhere else. And so, yeah, again, they won't be served really very much by Moynihan. I mean, people will argue that one way or the other. I think you actually need them both. I mean, if you think about 500,000 people a day, right, you need a room as big as the central room at Penn Station just for people to kind of move through and be in and, mill around and hang out and wait for their train or get their subway or go to their office or anything like that.
And I gather the original foundations are still there in such a way that you could build right on them?
Yeah, all the pilings, they didn't take any of that down. In fact, when you come up, when you arrive in via Amtrak and you go up the stairs, you're still using the original Penn Station railings. If you look down, the crisscross railing design is still there. And then you arrive at the top, and there's a photo on the wall showing you what your experience used to be like, which I always find the deepest irony.
So let's take a final look at your Back to the Future dream. There it is. I guess that's the slide of what was actually there. You would hope that it looks something like that again.
Yeah, new and clean and probably surrounded by tall buildings.
Well, the once and potentially future Penn Station. Thank you for sharing your vision with us.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
And that's our program for today. We're here each week at this hour, and tune into my daily radio program weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, the trees of New York and the pollen tsunami. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.